welcome to another edition of Issues with Jide. Here we'll talk about actions and inactions of those who shape our national landscape and how they impact us positively or otherwise. I'm Ibrahim Shita. Today on the show, we'll be talking about some very important topics. Talk about the AFCON and the lifting of Twitter, the ban on Twitter by the federal government. So in the course of the program, we'll take your questions. First, subscribe to our YouTube channel and drop your questions in the comment section. I've joining me via Zoom, the maestro himself, Babajide Kolade-Otitoju. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Again, Issues with Jide. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Trisha, it's nice to do this with you every week.
It's very nice to do this with you too, again. Federal government lifts suspension on Twitter operation in Nigeria after 7 months. Now Twitter is back. So after 7 months with economic losses of about 546.5 billion naira, the federal government has finally lifted the ban. Is that a cheering news to you? And what kind of Twitter have we got back? Is it totally a different Twitter?
Well, I would say it's good news if one of the federal government agencies could actually say on its Twitter handle that it's good to be back. But that means they recognize that the decision was not really a good one. So it's good to be back on Twitter. Well, even when the ban was in place, many Nigerians effectively bypassed it by using the virtual private network, VPN, which kept them alive on Twitter. There were also some government officials, including a governor in the Northwest, who continued to use Twitter even after it was banned. That's to tell you how irresistible that social media platform is. So it's a good thing that we are back, but in the fullness of time, we will know the kind of Twitter that we got back after 7 months. 7 months during which businesses suffered losses. Businesses that depended on social media networking to reach millions of clients suffered as a result of the ban on Twitter, including even banks. Banks have a way of reaching their depositors and other customers through the social media, and of course in real time. But during that period, it was very difficult for those banks, especially given the threat that was issued at the beginning that those who continued to defy the ban would be prosecuted. I think this got some Nigerians to effectively stay off Twitter so as not to be prosecuted. But invariably, some Nigerians refused to be silenced, and they continue to use the virtual private network, the VPN, to access Twitter. People like Shehu Sani, people like Aisha Yesufu, and other people who felt that, look, their days are never complete until they've been able to socialize through Twitter, Facebook, and other social media platforms. So, listening to the government talk about some of the concessions that Twitter the government talked about, it would seem clear that this time around, government wants to be sure of what goes on Twitter, at least as they concern Nigeria. Some of those conditions include that Twitter must register with the Corporate Affairs Commission, and that it should have a designated country representative that will interface with the Nigerian authorities from time to time, and that it has agreed to comply with all applicable tax laws as they concern our country. So basically, the government has, through this suspension, way to bring Twitter into the tax net, so that Twitter can now be registered in our country and pay taxes like any other. It's also operating in Nigeria. It also agreed to give Nigerian authorities the ability to take down tweets that the authorities consider to constitute some threat to the corporate existence or security of our country. If indeed that concession was made, if indeed Twitter agreed to give the Nigerian authorities the leverage to take down any posts against, to constitute a threat to the security of our country, then in the present nature of social media and the fact that it is an opportunity, it provides an opportunity for people to express their views without fear or favor, and that it allows people to be able to report the government even when government violates human rights and other privileges that is signed up to with the United Nations. Then that power to report government through social media could be taken away if government can decide on its own to take down any tweets that it considers to be injurious to the security of our country.
Yeah, Biko, the issue of human rights, as you mentioned, let me take you up on that.
Yes.
The ECOWAS court is expected to deliver a judgment on the case filed by the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, that's SERAP, next week. So do you consider the lifting of the ban a smart move on the part of the federal government?
You know, the government has been kind of playing games of this matter. This was not the first time that the matter of the suspension of Twitter or the ban on Twitter, the temporary ban on Twitter, will become a legal matter. I remember that the Attorney General went to court and said, look, we have not banned people from using Twitter, that people are still using Twitter in our country and nobody has been jailed for using Twitter. Of course, people were using Twitter using the private network that I talked about earlier. So in court, the government did not admit that it had stopped people from using Twitter. Away the fact that a ban was handed down. So I don't know whether the lifting ban was meant um, to kind of ensure that the government doesn't lose that case in court. But it could, in fact, also be um, coincidental. But we know that some of the reliefs being sought could actually have been granted by the fact that the ban had been lifted and by the fact that the two parties that's talking about Twitter and the federal government appear to be happy with the decision taken, because reading through the Twitter statement, I do not see evidence of anger and all that. It shows that in the course of the suspension, they had a lot of interface, and both parties appear to be happy to work together on the content emanating from Twitter. But it's still my considered opinion that banning social media platforms constitutes an infringement of Chapter 2, subsection 22 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. That provision says the press, and I quote, it says, and I quote, the press, radio, television, and other agencies of the mass media shall at all times be freed. Let me take it again. The press, radio, television, and other agencies of the mass media shall at all times be free to uphold the fundamental objectives contained in this chapter and uphold the responsibilities and accountability of the government to the people. That's the 1999 Constitution as amended, Chapter 2, Section 22. That's what it says. So by banning Twitter, the government had contravened Chapter 2, Section 22 of the 1999 Constitution as amended in 2011 on the right to free press, because talking about social media is still part of the mass media that the Constitution talked about and guaranteed their freedom to uphold the responsibilities of government. So we need the social media to be able to draw attention to things that the government was not doing right. And so when you take that right away, or you try to abridge that right in any way, you have contravened the provisions of the Constitution of our country. And I agree with the minority caucus of the House of Reps, which says that government has no reason to be regulating social media in a democracy like ours. I agree with them, because once we have given the government the latitude to do this, no one knows where government will stop. No one knows. So those who are jubilating and seeing this as the exercise of the might of Nigeria, they are just deluded and being hypocritical. No. Yes, of course, social media has its excesses, and leaders of these social media platforms are sometimes too influenced politically. The notion that they are apolitical or that they do not support any party is not right, given what we saw play out between Twitter, Facebook on one hand, and Donald Trump banning a sitting president from using the social media right up to 2023 is is an exercise of reckless exercise of the powers of the social media. Of course, Trump too can be blamed for some of his comments, incendiary comments. But where technological giants can take a decision to say, look, you, president of this country, you cannot use the social media for the next 3 years. I don't think that it makes any sense. Because the Yorubas will say beheading a man is not the solution to headache. But that's what it looks like. So for some countries bent on regulating social media, you could say that they have a point. But in my view, going that whole hog, there must be mechanisms by which you can address some of the problems rather than a wholesale ban.
Right.
As we have had in the case of Nigeria.
Right, makes sense. Fabian Akeze is asking a question saying, let us be honest, was there ever really any Twitter ban in Nigeria? And I'm going to link that with my next question, which says studies show that at least 98% of Twitter revenue comes from Europe, America, and Asia. So the remaining 2% is from Africa and others. The market is so small. Is that to say that rather than hurt Twitter with this ban, the government only cut off its nose to spite its own face?
Well, it's right, but there was a ban in place, and many of us also didn't use Twitter during that period. Many of us deactivated our Twitter accounts. I mean, we refused to. We left our Twitter accounts deactivated and we refused to use it because of the risk of hacking through the VPN. Because the warning was out there that people can lose their money and valuable information through the VPN. It just takes being unlucky, for that to happen. So, yes, Twitter was banned. If TV stations, for example, had the opportunity to reach millions of people, but government told the NBC to stop TV stations from using their Twitter handles, or radio stations too from using their Twitter handle, branding those using their Twitter handle after the ban as unpatriotic people. So you can imagine how many people have been reached if a TV station could post videos on Twitter. But that didn't happen during the period. So no one can say that a ban was not in place because regulators told the internet service providers, for example, that they should deactivate Twitter. So if it was left alone, of course, more people will be able to use it. But the truth is, yes, a good number of Nigerians bypassed the ban, disregarded the ban, using the virtual private network. But it still doesn't take away the fact that a ban was in place and many people could not use Twitter at that time. Because you can't use it unless you use the VPN. That's to tell you that the ban was in place. But Nigerians, talking about the losses, yes, many businesses that relied on Twitter to reach millions and millions of their clients lost good money because they could not have access to Twitter. Banks and others who could reach, who are habitually reaching their clients through the social media, the micro blogging sites.
And even complaints that people
will not do that. So
the way people call out, corporate organizations whenever there are issues, when they do the hashtag kind of a thing.
Yes. For example, if an airline or even a bank, the fastest way to get the response of just send a tweet to complain. We discovered that was the fastest way to reach them, because they don't want to see anything negative about their bank on social media. But the moment this thing happened, Twitter could no longer be used to address such problems, So, and the customers were were worse for it. Customers were the greatest losers as a result of that. So, yes, there was a ban in place, despite the fact, and the ban really hurt businesses, despite the fact that some people were bypassing it through the VPN, but
Right.
it still didn't stop the pain that the ban inflicted.
Absolutely, BKO. So about AFCON and what is going on currently, I have it in good authority that Nigeria is leading, and then it's just 3-0 against Sudan. But let me start by asking you that by talking about the previous game, the Super Eagles, played, people believe it was largely a comfortable win for Nigeria's Super Eagles against Mo Salah's Egypt. Is that to say Super Eagles have a greater chance under Augustine Eguavoen?
Sometimes when you use a foreign coach, it helps because they have greater knowledge of our players, the psychological makeup of our players, and their history. They have that much more than the foreign coach. The foreign coach could be better in terms of tactics, in terms of even coming up with a training regime for players. But when it comes to the knowledge of our players, then the indigenous coach is better. But tactically and technically, we have come to see foreign coaches, especially those of them that are tested and trusted, as better than our own coaches, especially coaches from countries with tremendous football tradition like Brazil, like the old Yugoslavia, even Germany. They tend to produce good coaches that are very tactical and in nature, who will come up with the right strategies. But our coaches too, if they get the right exposure, they will do better than foreign coaches. So if Eguavoen were to win this tournament, it will be because of his knowledge of our players. And don't forget, he's been coach of this team twice. So this is the third time that he's coming back as coach of this team. So he's familiar with all the players, and he understands them. He knows how to handle this player, because psychology is very important in football, and man management. If you don't have man management skills, you can be very good tactically and still not get the desired results. So Eguavoen is doing well for now, but these are early days. I want to see this team compete against some of the North African countries like Morocco. I want to see them against Senegal, see how well they will perform. For now, there's a bit of individual play that I see. Some substitutions that just didn't go well. So the coach has to be careful. I'm happy that for today's match, he retained the starting 11 against Egypt. So they say you don't change a winning team. So that's a very good decision on the part of Eguavoen. He appears to be getting everything right at this point, but his substitutions in subsequent games, he has to watch his substitutions. Don't bring in a player who is not going to contribute, you know. So
let me get something
let our
clear.
team improve their teamwork. Once they improve their teamwork, I don't think there's any team in this tournament that can beat our team.
Yeah. Let me get something clear, BKO. You know, talk about pace, talk about power, aggression. You know, it actually characterized the performance of the Eagles. Eguavoen seems to understand the temperament of the Nigerian players. When they are angry, when they need something, when they speak, I mean, he definitely speaks the language. So if I want to understand the point you're driving at, is that to say a homegrown coach is way better than foreign coaches, or the other way around?
A homegrown coach that is exposed, that has gone for refresher courses abroad, will do a much better job. I'm not going to say that the local coaches are better than the foreign coaches. The results at African level, the results do not support that notion. You know, Clemens Westerhoff, for example, is the greatest coach to come out of Nigeria. When he came from Holland, he took us to the second round of the World Cup. In only our first World Cup, we got to the second round. And that was the best ever performance by an African team, because we beat Bulgaria 3-0 in our first match. And that same Bulgaria reached the semi-final of the competition. So that's to tell you that the Bulgaria that we beat was very good. Then we were in the same group with Italy. You know, Italy too also did very well in that competition. So we were in a very tough group. Yet, Italy that eliminated us in that second round went far in the competition. So I'm saying that we were in a tough group, yet we beat our first opponent silly. That was the best performance by an African team going to the World Cup for the first time, you know. So, and he also won the Nations Cup. So Africa has used many foreign coaches and they've done very well. Was the father of Morocco, for example, took Morocco to the brink of a quarterfinal, World Cup quarterfinal, only to lose by an 87-minute free kick by Lothar Matthaus of Germany. So the foreign coaches have done well on this continent. The point that I'm making is, if our own coaches are exposed to the right training methods, they are sent abroad for refresher courses, constantly attached to some great football coaches. For example, if an Eguavoen were to be attached to Man City coach, let him even work there for like 1 month, like interns come to work with us at TVC. You will know that by the time Eguavoen comes back, he will be a much better coach. Ten Hag, the coach of Ajax Amsterdam, that Manchester United wants now to be their next coach. He used to be assistant to the coach of Man City, Pep Guardiola. Today, Ten Hag is rated among the best coaches in the world. Everyone has seen what Ajax has done in the Champions League group stages. So what I'm saying is, the indigenous coach can be the best if he has the exposure, if he's afforded the opportunity of training abroad and all that. Our own footballers too go abroad and they come back much better. You can't tell me that Osimhen was as good as this before he left Nigeria. Even Amokachi, Yekini, they were not as good as they were. They were much better after they came back from playing abroad or after they traveled abroad. So the same thing applies with coaches. If our local coaches go abroad and are exposed sufficiently, they will be world beaters. They will be very good. Remember, Shaibu Amadu. Shaibu Amadu was always going to Brazil. His hard-hand money, when he was coach of BCC Lions, he was spending it going abroad, going to Brazil for refresher courses.
Right.
That's how he became one of the best indigenous coaches to come out of Nigeria. So that is what I'm proposing. Okay. It's possible for Eguavoen to win this tournament. But we have already said even that after this tournament, he will revert to his role as a technical director. We have made up our minds to hire a foreign coach from Portugal. But the point that I'm making is our own indigenous coaches can be as good as the foreign coaches if they're exposed to foreign trainings and all that.
Right. Investing in local content, just like the president has also says, consuming local content is something that we've been advocating in Nigeria. So maybe that's exactly the same thing you're saying as regards sports. We should ensure that we invest in our local content. But then, Ighalo, Osimhen, and Leon Balogun are absent from the tournament in Cameroon. Yes. So would you say the Eagles are better off without them? Just like you said, going abroad and coming back home to hit it.
No, I won't say they are. I won't say they are better. I would have loved to have them. We are doing well up to this point, but I can imagine having Osimhen in that front line. Osimhen is the best striker from Nigeria currently, and he's no nonsense in nature. He's aggressive, and he takes his chances. So if our team is playing this well and the midfield is this solid, you can be sure that Osimhen will bank in many goals, because Taiwo and Iheanacho, they are wasting some chances that I know that if Osimhen was there, Osimhen would have buried those chances. That's why he's probably our biggest player in Europe at this time. So I won't say that we are better off without them. You can imagine if we have Emmanuel Dennis of Watford, his ability to take on players, to beat players and score that wonderful goal. We will have benefited a lot more. We will have a very rich bench that we can pick from. Once Chukwueze is tired, we can easily bring in Emmanuel Dennis, because he can play across the front three. So these players will have beefed up our team. Those three players you mentioned and Emmanuel Dennis, they will have made our team stronger. But we do not have them now. So, and we are happy with the ones that we have. So, let's continue to hope that the team will improve with every match. And with the 3 goals that we have scored against Sudan, I'm seeing signs that this team is improving with every match.
Right. Because we're actually heading home now. We just have a few minutes to end the program. Let me take this question from Raji Abdullahi, which is on our first topic. It says, good evening, Mr. Bikeo. The lifting of ban on Twitter comes in the election year. Please, in your own view, how do you relate with this? Relate this with the forthcoming election.
I don't think it has so much to do with election. I think the president felt pained that they took down his tweets that they considered to constitute a threat to peace, and he had been seeing how some people, some elements with their own tweets. I think they are particularly angry that a lot of the propaganda posts made by Nnamdi Kanu were on Twitter, and that Twitter didn't do anything. So what we now saw Twitter do was that immediately that suspension was handed down, he began to take down some of the earlier posts made by Nnamdi Kanu. So the president and his minders felt slighted, and they took that decision at that time. So even in bringing it back, I don't think there's politics about it. I don't think there's politics about it. The president just felt slighted, that's all.
Right, Biko. Finally, let's go back to the AFCON. Now we were doing 3-0 when we started the show, and now they scored a penalty. The Sudan scored a penalty. That's 3-1. what has been your expectation, or what have been your expectations ahead of the match?
I just want us to play as a team, restore the lost glory of Nigerian football. Because when countries like Madagascar were beating us, countries like Central African Republic, I was really ashamed. But I just hope that going to this tournament, that's why we are missing some key players, that we will be able to restore the lost glory of Nigerian football. Because when small teams begin to beat you, your glory is gone. You know, a country that countries used to dread, now losing to Madagascar, losing to Central African Republic, struggling to beat Sierra Leone, you know, things like that. So I just hope that going to that tournament, we'll give our best and make Nigeria proud. I wasn't thinking that we could win. Even now, I'm still not thinking that we could win the tournament. But if the team goes ahead to surprise me and they win, I'm going to take it and rejoice with them. So that is the thing. So I'm backing Nigeria with my full chest in the hope that victory will come our way in the tournament.
All right. I will say Aluta Continua Victoria Sata to that. All right,
that's fair enough.
Absolutely. And that's our show for today's edition of Issues with Jide. Special thanks to you, Babajide Kolade-Otitoju, for those insightful analyses as always. Thank you
for another wonderful show.
Right.
We'll do it again next week.
Amen. And thanks to you, to our audience, for joining us on every edition. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, TVC News. Click on the subscribe button to get the latest information. I'm Ibrahim Shita. See you again next edition. Bye for now.